Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we are answering a question I've had for the last couple of updates, ever since these mid-tier cruisers got their heals. What's the point of Prince Eugen now that Hipper has a heal? That was always the selling point of a Prince Eugen. It was a Hipper, but you actually got some healing. Yeah, you had a longer reload, but that was generally worth it, as mid-tier cruisers without heals is rather challenging to play. Thankfully now, all these mid-tier cruisers, or at least the vast majority of them, looking at you, Bayard and Belfast, have those heals, which was a very good change overall. All these mid-tier cruisers that got heals are vastly more playable. This is a very, very welcome change in my opinion. Though it does beg the question, what's the point of Prince Eugen now? Well, they did buff Prince Eugen with a little more alpha damage on the armor piercing, as well as improved pen angles on that armor piercing. So we're going to take a look at these two ships today. And in fact, I have back-to-back E's to show you within 500 damage of each other. One of them in Hipper and one of them in Prince Eugen. See if you can spot some differences. Notably, while playing, I really enjoyed having Hipper with heals now. This ship, with its reload, feels absolutely amazing. The AP here is still very good, mind you. Yeah, we don't have the improved pen angles. Yeah, we are missing out on 200 alpha damage. But that doesn't matter. We still have 5,900 alpha damage on this AP from Hipper. And even into somewhat angled targets, superstructures, that sort of thing, the odd pen here and there is still giving us some very, very nice damage. I really did notice the improved reload here. Hipper feels a lot more consistent in that regard, as well as on the HE. Now Hipper, this line, not known for its HE DPM, outside of maybe Hindenburg, where it turns it up pretty high. It's mostly an AP spamming line until you get there. But the HE is still very solid. You get very nice 51 millimeters of pen. Not the most fires per minute, but that's okay because you pen basically every battleship everywhere, which is really nice for its consistency. It forces the enemy ships to decide, am I willing to just take consistent ship damage from this German cruiser, or am I going to risk going broadside? Knees back here, deciding that. Whether or not we're going to get that into the North Carolinas as well, we shall see. But Hipper absolutely feasts on these upper belts of these enemy larger ships. Battle cruisers, battleships, that sort of thing. And we've found ourselves in pretty much the perfect scenario for a German cruiser. We want to be on the flank where the enemy team is pushing in with a lot of these large ships with a ton of armor. We want to force them to decide if they are eating the full pen damage from the HE or going broadside and potentially eating that armor piercing damage. We're also able to play far enough back that we're able to dodge a lot of the incoming fire. Got 27 millimeters of armor everywhere, so we can angle to that Tirpitz at least. Maybe not those North Carolinas, but we have a decent amount of armor, and if we do happen to catch a North Carolina salvo, they are very, very slow shells, so we should be able to dodge. If we happen to eat some, we have the healing now. It was really comfortable, and this is much more of that Hindenburg experience just at tier 8 now. I think it runs a little smoother up into that top tier ship. Although Rune can be a bit of a road bump now. I think a lot of tier 9 cruisers are suddenly a road bump on the way to tier 10. Tier 8s feel good, tier 7s feel good, tier 9 a little bit less so. Hipper notably also has a few more areas where it's a little better than Prince Eugen. One thing is the range. North Carolina here is almost outside of our range, yet we are still just barely able to catch him. We have 17.7 kilometers of range, where Prince Eugen only has 17.5. Now I know that is a very minor difference. However, that is going to directly result in us actually still being able to shoot at this North Carolina as he's on such low HP and hopefully finish him off. So it's not just the reload. I know this is splitting hairs here, but still, it did matter here. Crucially, though, much more impactfully, is the maneuverability. Okay, 9.2 second rudder base on Admiral Hipper. Prince Eugen is 10.9. That is a rather large difference, as well as Hipper having a 740 meter turning circle radius. Prince Eugen's is 770. While playing these back to back, I won't say that it's a dramatic difference. But I will say I did notice that the Eugen felt a little bit sluggish. It felt a little bit less maneuverable. Hipper felt a little bit lighter on its feet. They are both not the most maneuverable cruisers, but there was something there. And we also have a little better concealment on Hipper. The base detect being 13.8 on Hipper, and Prince Eugen is 14.5. So pretty big difference there as well. Is one heal, the 200 alpha damage on the AEP and the improved pen angles on the AEP, worth all of those downsides for the Prince Eugen? It's going to be pretty hard for it to make up for those differences. Hipper is probably the better ship on paper, and in practice I do think so as well. But the Eugen is an interesting side grade where we do focus a little bit more on that armor piercing. I speculated before this update went live, this is 2 updates ago now, but this buff to all these mid-tier cruisers went live, that it looked like they might be giving Prince Eugen the Blucher shells. Not only did that come with improved pen angles as well as the alpha damage buff, Blucher's got a lot more pen than the Hipper does, which allows it to be a little more consistent at these longer ranges into heavy cruisers, maybe even battle cruisers, getting some citadels. At 15 kilometers, we have 176 millimeters of pen on Hipper's AP. Not great, to be honest with you, for 203s, but fine enough. Blucher is up at 214 millimeters of pen. Unfortunately, Prince Eugen did not get the pen buff, so we do not have that level of consistency. Blucher also does get some very nice dispersion characteristics. It's down to destroyer dispersion rather than just cruiser dispersion. Prince Eugen did not get that buff either. I'm a little sad about that, as I do wish Prince Eugen would have had those 2 characteristics, made it even more consistent with the AP, but rather sluggish with the high explosive. I thought that would be an interesting design. That is still the idea, but it's not quite as good at that, unfortunately. So Hipper, really nice into these destroyers with the high explosive. Swapping over to the AP feels very, very good. And we consistently are able to play at these closer, medium to closer ranges, especially when we get against our own tier. Notably, these games are not against tier 10s. They're not against submarines at tier 10, carriers at tier 10. Every once in a while, I have a few people comment that. And yes, understandably, my best games are not against the worst possible matchmaker when I'm playing these mid-tier cruisers. Bit of a shocker, I know, but that is definitely with good reason that we are having our best games against our own tier. And with this one on our flank, I do think the Hipper and its improved reload was really better than the Prince Eugen, this batch in particular. I think if we're finding ourselves on a flank where possibly we're getting only a specifically small number of salvos, where we need them to be a little more impactful, or we're dealing with more angled targets and the improved pen angles can start to help us out with the Prince Eugen, that's where that ship can start to shine. But a situation like this where the enemy team is pushing into us on this flank, we just need to DPM them down. Yeah, Hipper is definitely going to be better in those scenarios. The other thing being we're able to play a little bit closer to the enemy without being detected thanks to the improved concealment, also lending itself to a little bit better consistency. Though we're not always getting that consistency out of Hipper main guns. We can get the shatters and the bounces out of that armor piercing. When we swap over to the HE, it's not like the HE is that incredible on Hipper either. I know I'm saying it is much better than Prince Eugen, but it's not that amazing either. We're getting 2,000 damage, maybe 3,000 damage per salvo, maybe a fire here or there. It's not that impressive when you're comparing it to other tier 8 heavy cruiser HE. Certainly the armor piercing is where it's going to do better if we don't get those bounces and those shatters. Maybe that salvo we would have done a little better with the Prince Eugen. Maybe we would have done damage more like this, right? 4,500 or so. That's the difference. The HE is doing 2,000, maybe 3,000. The AP on the good salvos, 4,000 to 6,000, 7,000, maybe somewhere in there. There's our E, 146k out of this one. Thankfully, we had a very good destroyer on our flank and just over 3k base out of this one as well. Nice battle impact for a cruiser without a radar. That is something we need to keep in mind. No radars on either of these ships, so we're reliant on our guns to really carry our battle impact. We want to be pushing up closer to caps if possible and helping our destroyers in these engagements early on. Moving on to our next game with Prince Eugen, doing exactly that. We have ourselves a lot of cruisers in this battle, not a lot of battleships. Colorado on this flank. Ours spawned both middle, so I was playing a little overly aggressive perhaps into the A cap, just sailing in the open water, but we get away with it. Lazo pops out broadside and 2 citadels for over 12,000 damage. Yes, it's only a 200 alpha damage buff, but it is nice to see that extra alpha damage there. He's starting to angle to us, turning away a little bit, so these shells go a little low in water, or at least we get the overpens as well. Not exactly what we're looking for. So theoretically more consistent because of the improved pen angles, but what if you just overpenned instead? AP has this issue. Talk about it on battleships a lot, a little bit of the frustration sometimes, and it does spill over into cruisers. But there we go. 5 full pens and a citadel, nearly finishing them off. Friendlies managed to do so. Now we can start to push this flank. Both Eugen and Hipper are pretty good in a kited position, right? But what happens if we need to push through a flank in particular? Well, getting these cross shots into the cruisers in the middle of the map, we would expect the improved pan angles to help us out if they start to angle. Not that they necessarily are right now, but that can lead to some better consistency. And both of these ships have some pretty good torp power. You get 6 torps off of either side, allowing you to push into some islands and maybe get a YOLO torp rush off on a battleship. This Colorado, unfortunately, fighting an up tier here. And maybe he's new, but he's shooting HE. So I know, maybe not the best example there. Let's focus more on these cruisers that are rather broadside, I would say, for these improved pen angles, which, by the way, are 55 to 65 degree pen angles. Standard is 45 to 60. So small improvement there. Notably, Des Moines, Baltimore at tier 8 pen angles are 60 to 68 degrees. So we're not quite that level, but we're pretty close, somewhere in between. And that does result in some nice consistency, though we actually just need to hit the target. Sometimes cruiser dispersion feels a little bit bad. Maybe that's lock-on bugs, actually. I don't know, but some of these longer range shots that I was getting into the Rochester in a little bit, as we will see, it was a little bit unfortunate, I suppose we could say. Torps off one side, swap to the torps on the other side, and perfectly, we're actually going to torp our teammate here. But you get the idea, okay? These YOLO torps can work out if you're in the right position for it. You're not going to use it all that often, but it is worth noting that these German cruisers do have some pretty impressive close-range torpedo power. It allows them to hold a flank a little bit easier, perhaps, holding island positions, that kind of thing, or push through a flank where you need to take out a battleship rather quickly. Rochester going in for our Cleveland, and he's definitely broadside enough, but like I said, the dispersion left a little something to be desired, right? That's where Blucher and its destroyer dispersion feels a little bit better. Now, we got a lot of damage to make up if we're going to catch up to our Hipper game, and that is going to come through here in a bit. But we'll take out the Rochester and make our way over to the C side of the map, where the enemy team is doing much better. We've won our flank, they've pretty much won their flank, so then we will meet in the middle. And perhaps this is where Eugen is going to be a little bit better with its improved pen angles. Cleveland, very well angled to us, 22 degrees. So Hipper guns, I would not expect to be getting many full pens here. And we're getting torp protection hits as well as pens. Notice no bounces there. Not quite enough pen. The Blucher shell pen would have been pretty nice. Maybe get some citadels, but they weren't bounces there. That was actually some full pens, even at such an extreme angle. That's the benefit we are getting here with the Prince Eugen. You're sacrificing a lot. Reload, maneuverability to gain that improved pen angles. You're also getting 1 extra heal. How valuable that is, I personally don't think it's extremely valuable. 4 heals versus 3. It's pretty hard to make use of that last heal rather consistently. A lot of games are going to look like this, where you've played well, or maybe your flank has been overly easy, and you haven't had to heal too much early. Or you've had to heal quite a bit, but a lot of the healing in the late game suddenly isn't very healable damage, right? When you're taking citadels, torps, even just regular pen damage from HE, as well as armor piercing, you're only healing back 50% of that. So once you've healed a couple times, maybe a lot of the damage that is remaining on your ship isn't all that healable at all anymore either. So it is of questionable value. It is an advantage that Eugen has, but of questionable value. Now, pushing into a kited mines is a little bit scary, but good full pen damage there into the mines. We're not getting the citadels, which I may have been hoping for, into either the Lexington or the mines, but it's solid full pen damage, and I will gladly take that. At these longer ranges, sometimes the Hipper AP shells can start to shatter and bounce a lot more. Lexington is very angled, so this is hitting his deck armor, so it's not really helping, or not doing that much. But I do think that the AP is much better at the medium and longer ranges. Into broadside Delawares at 10 kilometers, I don't think there's going to be much difference. Overall, Eugen is still a pretty solid tier A cruiser, but Hipper is just so much better now. I really do think that the buff to Hipper was very, very nice. This heal buff was needed for a lot of these mid-tier cruisers, but it has left some of the cruisers that had heals previously feeling a little underwhelming, and I would say Prince Eugen is one of them. Even if we can do pretty well in this ship still, Hipper is just a better experience now. Maneuverability-wise, still getting most of the healing benefit, and of course, pretty solid reload benefit as well. The improved bat angles are nice, but for the vast majority of the time, you are just getting broadsides anyway, and if not, the HE is likely what you're going to as well. I don't think the pen angles are helping us get more consistency on broadsides. I would have hoped for maybe a little bit more citadels into ships like mines or other hippers, that sort of thing, ships with turtleback that can be bouncing some cruiser shells, but maybe the improved pen angles help us out. I wasn't really noticing that quite as much. So for me, this is a cool buff to the Prince Eugen to give it a little something, given that every cruiser around it suddenly has healing now. That's kind of the main gimmick has gone away. Got something, at least over Atago, right? Atago didn't even get anything, really, even though everything got heals around it. Now, Atago is a pretty strong cruiser, sure, but at least Prince Eugen got a little buff. Maybe some of the other heal cruisers could use something like that. I know we're getting into some serious power creep territory where suddenly everything in the game just has to be way more powerful. I know, but I really am glad that to see a lot of these mid-tier cruisers get their heals. And I wanted to know, is it worth playing Eugen still? Maybe not. Perhaps if you still have them, you can swap Lucians over for free, where Hipper you cannot. But notice how late that we activated our Lucian's buff here, right at the end of the game. Whereas with Hipper, I got it a little bit sooner. So even though you can swap commanders for free onto these premiums, Hipper will take advantage of him a little better, but you'll have to pay. Yeah, it's tough. It is tough for the Prince Eugens out there. I am glad to see the heals for Hipper though, but it is definitely a much better ship than the Prince Eugen now. I know, perhaps not the most surprising outcome. It really did look like on paper that Hipper should be a lot better than Prince Eugen now. And after playing them, I still like Prince Eugen. I still do. The AP feels very nice, but it still does on Hipper as well. That was always the weakness. That was always the downside of playing something like the Hipper. And really, the mid-tier cruisers in general that didn't have heals was, if you took a hit, your game was pretty much over. That is no longer the case. We can be a little more aggressive. We can try some things, including, yeah, this is the build I was running. It was running steering gears mod. I really enjoy this on my cruisers these days, giving up a little bit of concealment for some very nice rudder shift times. Now, 6.5 seconds looks pretty darn nice, but onto the Hipper, we get 5.5 seconds. So a whole second faster, as well as better turning circle radius with that exact same build. With our commander being Lucians, this is what I would recommend. I actually was running Grease the Gears. I don't know why I wasn't running Gunfeeder with how often I was switching shells. Highly would recommend Gunfeeder, although perhaps you noticed we were losing our engine rather often, or at least I was in a lot of the games I was playing with these two ships. Last stand might be required on these two. Even if an HE shell, like if a battleship HE shell hits the water next to you, a midship, even if it doesn't hit you, it can still knock your engine out rather often. That happens a lot less, though, as we get into higher tier. So if you're playing through these ships, as I would definitely recommend, you grind through Hipper and all the way up to Hindenburg, as Hindenburg is an awesome ship still. It's maybe not as important on that higher tier one. So the armor, though, looks a little something like this. 27 everywhere with a little 40 mil icebreaker. Very nice. And here is that turtleback I was talking about. You get 80 on the outside and then 30 on the inside. And it is angled. So sometimes cruiser shells can get through this. A lot of times it's battleships that are getting through this. Cruisers will just kind of bounce. But maybe those improved pen angles can help us out with the Prince Eugen. I'm not sure. But Hipper felt very, very good with this update. If you guys have been playing your Hipper Prince Eugen, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe Prince Eugen could use a little more. Maybe some of these heal cruisers that did not get too much love could use a little bit more as well. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. For now, though, that is going to do it. Hipper is a very, very good tier 8 cruiser, and I'd highly recommend you grind through this line up to Hindenburg these days. There's not really a better time than now to do it. This is the best these cruiser lines have been in a very, very long time. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.